Speaker.
I call the Minister for Transport and Main Roads.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, Mr Speaker, before the election, the LNP promised that it would uncover and unravel Labor's mess and publish the true cost of Cross River Rail within 100 days of forming government in the spirit of openness and transparency. And, Mr Speaker, today I can share with the House that Cross River Rail is likely to exceed $17 billion in cost. $17 billion. And it is unlikely to be complete until 2029, Mr Speaker. 2029, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, in the beginning, Labor promised Queenslanders time and time again that Cross River Rail would be delivered within a budget of $5.4 billion, and they promised that it would be finished by 2024, this year. And now, Mr Speaker, it's clear just how far that dishonesty reached. Mr Speaker, before the election, the then Transport Minister, Bart Mellish, stood in front of estimates and said that we would have majority completion in 2025, next year, and first services in 2026. We now know that that is not possible. And, Mr Speaker, the true picture, the grim picture, Mr Speaker, was that what he claimed was the cost was just to build and maintain the tunnels, and that cost alone has now blown out to $10.5 billion. 10.5. Mr Speaker, on no less than 35 occasions did Labor members, including the former Premier Stephen Miles, including former Transport Ministers Mark Bailey and Bart Mellish, former Treasurer Cameron Dick and numerous others over that side, they came in here and they claimed that Cross River Rail would cost $5.4 billion. But, Mr Speaker, not only did the former Labor government hide the real cost of the tunnelling works for Cross River Rail, they also hid the cost of the integration works needed to ensure that those tunnels were useful. The trains on the existing rail network could connect to them to ensure that there was stabling to park the trains in, and practical station elements like station doors, platform doors. Those auxiliary works, Mr Speaker, were hidden in other parts of the budget in multiple separate line items, deliberately to misdirect Queenslanders from what the real cost was. And I can hear the member for Waterford over there interjecting, protecting the lady who trained her in the former member for South Brisbane, Jackie Tradd. Jackie Tradd's apprentice over there is yelling quite loud, Mr Speaker.
I appreciate there's some provocation in the ministerial statement, but the fact that I cannot hear the member for Buderim speaks volumes. So the noise level is too high. So members, please. Member for Buderim, Minister, you have the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Thank you for your protection. Mr Speaker, those auxiliary works were hidden in other parts of the budget in multiple separate line items to hide the true cost. Now, those opposite might try and claim that we're cooking the books. I saw that reported last night, Mr Speaker. We're cooking the books. We're inflating the numbers, Mr Speaker. That's what those opposites say. It's a bit rich coming from them, the same Labor members who cooked the books hiding all of those numbers. Who can forget the Queensland Train Manufacturing Program? The downfall of the now Shadow Health Minister, the member for Miller, hit a $2 million blowout in there. Now, the interesting thing about the Queensland Train Manufacturing Program, Mr Speaker, I've been criticised for including the maintenance costs of Cross River Rail in our numbers. Now, I would argue that maintenance is a pretty important thing for a government to perform. Just have a look at Callide Power Station. But if we set that aside for a second, by their own measure, the Labor Party included maintenance costs when it came to the Queensland Train Manufacturing Program, yet they hid it on Cross River Rail. They hid it on Cross River Rail so they could mislead Queenslanders, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, once again, Queenslanders have been let down by Labor's hollow rhetoric. More than $16 billion, Mr Speaker. That's a number that makes your eyes water, and it is one that taxpayers deserve to know about. On top of that, Mr Speaker, the real estimated completion date of 2029, when we were told that services should be operating this year, 2024, that was the original number, 2024. 2029 is what I have been briefed is the likely date where services will be available for Queenslanders. All that delay does is it drives up costs even further. Mr Speaker, in contrast, I can guarantee that the Christofouli government will fight for every taxpayer dollar. We will make sure that we work every single day to get Labor's Cross River Rail mess back on track. We will negotiate with Cross River Rail contractors to make sure they uphold their end of the bargain, and we will make sure that we don't see the significant delays that have already mounted up this year. 140 days of industrial action on Cross River Rail under Labor this year. That's what this former government presided over, 140 days of industrial action from the CFMEU on Cross River Rail. Faced with a choice between siding with militant unions like the CFMEU or the Queensland taxpayer, this Christofouli government will always side with the taxpayer, Mr Speaker. The days of Labor taking Queenslanders for granted are done, Mr Speaker. The Christofouli government will deliver a fresh start for Queensland.